The bright side of addiction is recovery.
I still, when I think about going back to it, it goes right to my heart because she was in such pain.
That's the voice of former First Lady Betty Ford's daughter, who was a part of the medical intervention on April 1st back in 1978 that was done by Dr. Joseph Pursch, one of the leaders and legends in the field of addiction education, treatment, and recovery. Dr. Pursch passed away on June 20th at the age of 92. His legacy of one of hope and the promise of attaining long-term recovery. Now, in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we will honor Dr. Pursch. We will pay tribute to his legacy of love for those suffering from addictive disease. And we'll hear from a few of his friends and his oldest son, as well as top country singer Larry Gatlin, who owes his life to Dr. Pursch. And we'll hear more from Betty Ford's daughter, Susan, who was part of that intervention nearly 45 years ago. And I'll revisit one of the many interviews that I did with Dr. Pursch over the many years that he has been in the field. We will also include some highlights from his many recovery talks, and we'll conclude the podcast with a personal poetic tribute to one of the addiction treatment leaders and legends who helped to change the face of treatment with the understanding that alcoholism and other addictions are treatable and that recovery is as recovery does. Now, some younger listeners may be unfamiliar with Dr. Pursch. His medical interventions have included the likes of former First Lady Betty Ford, former First Brother Billy Carter, he was the brother of former President Jimmy Carter, as well as luminaries in sports like Hollywood Henderson, in the entertainment business, and the airline industry. From astronauts to everyday people, Dr. Joe Pursch devoted his life to the field of addictive diseases. His heartprints are on the lives of hundreds of thousands of individuals and families all around the world. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. Following 15 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we have now upgraded to a national podcast, which is available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with clinicians, authors, recovering celebrities, and everyday people in recovery. Plus, vetted resources for individuals and families and friends, and some amazing stories of everyday recovery. We invite you to enjoy it, to share it with your friends. Recovery is as recovery does, and we'd love to hear from you. My email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Let us know what you think of the podcast, and perhaps you'd like to suggest a guest for us to consider. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of the top treatment centers in America, having successfully treated well over 200,000 adolescents, adults, and family members for the past 50-plus years. I recently received an email from a woman in California who said that she'd sent her adolescent daughter to Sundown about 10 years ago and wanted to thank me for telling people about Sundown's program that literally saved her daughter's life. It's another wonderful message of deep and abiding gratitude for the gift of long-term recovery. Now, if you're not familiar with Sundown, you should be. There may come a time when you or a family member or perhaps a close friend is in need of treatment for alcohol or other drug addiction. And in the middle of that crisis, it's often hard to wade through the options and do research with a clear mind. There are many treatment programs in this country. Good, solid, successful treatment programs. But there are also treatment programs that have a lot of flashy advertising and, frankly, are more interested in profit than recovery. And with all that flashy advertising, it's hard to really know what's best for your loved one. I understand that. And the treatment professionals at Sundown, they know that as well. So before you decide on a treatment program, I suggest you check out Sundown M Ranch outside of Seattle. Website is sundown.org. It's right at the mouth of the beautiful Yakima River. And not only does it offer comprehensive treatment for individuals and family members, It's one of the most affordable programs around. They are a nonprofit treatment center, and they've been successfully treating addiction and co occurring disorders for over 50 years. And over the years, their treatment outcomes have historically shown their programs to be efficient and highly effective. They're currently participating in a national outcome study project to help benchmark with other treatment programs around the country. They have a staff that's been together for a long time, which is a strong indicator of a successful program. Many of their professional staff have gone through treatment themselves at Sundown. They're licensed, accredited, and certified by the state of Washington. And this is important, they are members of NAATP, the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers, and rigorously adhere to best practices and a stringent code of ethics. I've referred a lot of people to Sundown over the years with excellent results. When you get a chance, check out their website, sundown.org, so you'll have a better understanding of what they do and why they're so successful. It's where recovery becomes a reality. Sundown.org is their website. Email is info@sundown.org. And you can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The road to addiction recovery begins at Sundown M Ranch. Dr. Joe Pursch was an American original. Although he was born in Chicago, he grew up in Yugoslavia. When he was 15 years old, amidst the threat from the Russians, he was separated from his parents and was sent to a number of labor camps during the last year of World War II. Back in 1946, he found safe passage to New York, and a social worker gave him money for a ticket to Detroit to live with his uncle. He began working as a high-rise window washer, and within a year he became proficient in English and owned his own window washing company in Detroit. Well, by then his parents were in a concentration camp. But once they were freed, young Joe was able to save enough money to bring them to America. He began his medical studies first in Detroit and then at Indiana University. Now, by this time, he'd married and started a family. Joe Pursch became Dr. Joe Pursch and enlisted in the Navy, where he became a flight surgeon. It was during this time when he realized that many people on the ship were suffering from alcoholism. The more he studied alcoholism, the more he realized that this was not just a Navy problem, but a worldwide problem. And along the way, he also became a psychiatrist, realizing that many of his alcoholic patients had co-occurring disorders. Soon thereafter, Dr. Pursch became the medical director of the Long Beach Alcohol Rehabilitation Hospital, and his reputation as an expert on addiction treatment resulted in his treating many high-profile patients, including former First Lady Betty Ford, President Carter's brother Billy Carter, astronaut Buzz Aldrin, top country singer Larry Gatlin, and countless others. He left the Navy in 1980 to become medical director of Comprehensive Care Corporation in Newport Beach. Dr. Pursch was a master communicator, and his wit and wisdom resulted in his carrying the message of hope and the promise of recovery through speaking engagements, a nationally syndicated newspaper column, and a series of films that became integral parts of treatment at many treatment centers around the country. Here's a clip of one of his 17 educational films on alcoholism.
As a physician and psychiatrist working with alcoholics, I now know that no profession is immune to the disease and no occupation is beyond the reach of recovery. I have been personally involved in the recovery of over 300 alcoholic doctors and pilots. It is professionally very rewarding to see these highly skilled people functioning, happy, and productive again. Sometimes I'm asked, Doctor, doesn't the thought of flying with a recovering alcoholic pilot make you nervous? My answer is, oh yes. What makes me nervous is the thought that if I had taken this flight 6 months ago, I would have been flying with a hungover alcoholic pilot. Lately, when I speak to audiences such as you, I often introduce myself by saying, my name is Joe Pursch, and I am a recovering alcoholic abuser, which means that I'm a doctor. Often in the past, I was treating alcoholic people for these conditions when I knew deep down I was enabling them to get sicker because I wasn't doing anything about their alcoholism. I was too embarrassed, and I didn't know what else to do. I was an alcoholic abuser because I was abusing alcoholic people. I'm now recovering. I'm going to conclude my talk with a plea. I think all of us in America have been alcoholic abusers. We must change our approach to this community illness. We need to start our own recovery, just as the alcoholic starts his recovery. We owe this to the alcoholic, and we certainly owe it to ourselves.
Following Dr. Pursch's passing, I spoke with a number of his friends and colleagues, including Len Baltzer, himself a legend in the field of alcoholism, having worked with Dr. Pursch, way back in the Navy days.
He put his career on the line to help some of these high-ranking people, celebrities, etc., at the risk of his own career to help them. And I thought that was, very unselfish.
I asked Len what Dr. Pursch's biggest contribution to the field of treatment was.
Well, his truth. I mean, he spoke the truth. He could back you in a corner and chew your butt out, but you knew you were loved, It didn't matter whether you were a patient or a staff member. He was just a joy to be around.
Another friend and colleague of Dr. Pursch is Hollywood producer, director, and author John Frederick, who saw Dr. Pursch as an outstanding communicator and produced many of his iconic treatment films.
I met Joe Pursch in 1972 at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I came up to him afterwards and said, listen, I'm getting into the movie business, and I think you have a lot to offer. The thing I really liked is that you did it with such humor.
Dr. Pursch was featured in 17 educational films on addiction in his career, and he and John Frederick developed a warm and loving relationship right up until his passing.
His legacy, he's at the big AA meeting in the sky as an honorary member, and he is surrounded by the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that he helped along the way. His legacy will live on for many years, many generations, and we'll always be grateful. I will always be grateful I got to work with Joe Pursch.
John Frederick mentioned Dr. Pursch's humor. Here's a clip from a film that he did called From Romance to Recovery.
So I brought a little clipping, which I will read for you. It says, bureaucratic jargon can be ridiculous, but sometimes even the less complicated directives go wrong. For example, Pennsylvania Commerce Secretary Norval Reese in Harrisburg asked for, quote, a list of male and female employees in the Commerce Department broken down by sex, unquote. This was necessary for an affirmative action study. Well, when you ask for a study, you usually get results. May not be good, but they come back. A few weeks later, the answer came back. Quote, we have no male or female employees broken down by sex. But we do have 2 alcoholics. What do we do now? That's the news of the day. We do have 2 alcoholics. I think everybody has alcoholics because alcoholism is a disease. As a matter of fact, it's a family disease. Of the 40 million Americans who suffer from it, about 10 million are actually alcoholic. The rest are co-alcoholics, or as we call them, other victims of alcoholism. A co-alcoholic, by the way, is anybody who cares about or lives with an alcoholic, or ever did so in the past. Some co-alcoholics don't even drink, but as a result of his dealing with the alcoholic, the co-alcoholic gradually becomes socially, psychologically, and psychosomatically ill. The process is kind of sneaky, insidious, predictable, and treatable. Treatment is also preventive because, you see, co-alcoholics tend to get involved with one alcoholic after another. And the children of alcoholics usually become alcoholics or marry alcoholics. But I have never seen an alcoholic who wanted to be an alcoholic or a co-alcoholic who wanted to be a co-alcoholic. No, this is a repetition compulsion, not a matter of choice. If any of you have trouble with that concept, then you answer this question for yourself. Can you imagine, even in your wildest dreams, that anybody, alcoholic or co-alcoholic, would do this to himself over and over if he could help it? No. Alcoholics and co-alcoholics need help from other people so that they can become whole again, or whole for the first time.
One of those who was made whole was Thomas Hollywood Henderson, a monster linebacker on the football field. He was an ominous presence on 4 NFL teams throughout his career, most notably with the Dallas Cowboys, where he helped the Cowboys to get to 3 Super Bowls. Now, Thomas was one of many individuals whose life was saved by Dr. Pursch, and he paid tribute to Dr. Pursch in the celebration of his life held a couple of months ago in Southern California.
Meeting Joe Pursch, I have to say, changed the direction of my life, of my psyche, of who I am and who I've become as a man. It's nice to be here with people who knew Joe. He paid some special attention to me because I don't remember my first several days at the care unit. I was in detox. You know, you can give the credit for your recovery to a lot of people. He came to my 25-year anniversary. He and I still have secrets, you know, confidential things. He told me how the mind worked on crack cocaine. He told me how the mind works on 151 flammable rum, which I was drinking a lot of at the end of my disease, or at the end of my journey. See, I'm here today because I'm a loyal guy. I showed up. I showed up today because I am grateful to Joe Pursch for introducing me to Chuck and Alcoholics Anonymous, and for those 7 months that I was like they sent me from the care unit to what, Starting Point or what, some other place. I mean, you know, I was one of those patients that you just knew needed a whole bunch of treatment. And I got it through Dr. Pursch. And they just kept putting me in places because I had nowhere to go.
Another well-known celebrity who owes his life to Dr. Pursch is Larry Gatlin, lead singer of the popular Grammy-winning country trio, the Gatlin Brothers, whose legendary run has covered close to 50 years. But Larry's career was nearly derailed 37 years ago. I caught up with Larry a few days ago as he was coming off the golf course, and I asked him what made Dr. Pursch different and what made Dr. Pursch so special.
Well, he was lovingly honest. And I've never really said that to anybody. You're getting exclusive. But just when I thought about that, when you say what was the one that he was lovingly honest. He came in there the first night, and I had my guitar, and he said, "Larry, you brought your guitar." I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Well, bring it to the session tomorrow when I see you." So I brought it to him. He said, "Now give the guitar to me." And I did. And he put it over behind his desk. I said, "I can't have my guitar?" You know, I was mad. He said, "No, your guitar is the way you cry. Playing your guitar is the way you cry. I want you to cry real tears." And he was right. When I'd get sad or upset, I'd take that guitar, and that would really kind of keep me from confronting whatever it was that was going on in my life. So, and then about the second or third meeting, he was really lovingly honest. He said, "Larry, your problem is not drugs and alcohol. Your problem is Larry. You're a horse's ass."
I asked Larry Gatlin if he could say one final thing to Dr. Pursch, what would it be?
Thanks for whatever has happened in my life since that day we met. I'm thanking him. So the bad things that have happened, that was just fate or me screwing up. But the good things are all a result of that man's guidance, his friendship. I used to check in with him, you know, every now and then just see if he was all right and tell him I was all right. So I would just tell him thanks. since that day, December 9th in '84, there's some wonderful things that happened to me and my family and my brothers. Carnegie Hall and Songwriters Hall of Fame. Well, more importantly, 4 incredibly wonderful grandchildren, and just the fact still alive.
Alive and well, and still touring with the Gatlin brothers. You know, I had the opportunity to have Dr. Pursch on my radio show, Recovery Coast to Coast, many times over the years. And in this interview, which was done in San Diego at the National Conference on Addiction Disorders about maybe 8 years ago, Dr. Pursch talked about fighting the stigma long associated with alcoholism. Dr. Joe Pursch joining us tonight on Recovery Coast to Coast. Great to have you with us. We are down here in San Diego. One final question. What do you see as the biggest challenge that we face as professionals in this field of addiction today?
The answer is the same as it's been 50, 60 years ago when I got into this field. That is the stigma surrounding it. The implication being there must be something wrong with you. Either it has to be something wrong with you. If it weren't, you wouldn't drink like you do, or you wouldn't be in rehab. And in our family, let's say if I'm an aristocratic family in Oklahoma, and we are very distinguished, a distinguished American icon family, my family might decide that in our family, the family name is worth more than the family kid. And most of the offspring in my family would die of addiction, and the nation would never say it. And as you're listening to this broadcast right now, even you know some of those families. So the problem is still the same.
Are we making inroads into reducing stigma?
We are making huge inroads, and the biggest inroad was the open admission of Betty Ford.
Absolutely.
Not only that she had the problem, but number 2, that she then went to a facility for fixing it, and then number 3, that she then continued to live in this new way. That is the biggest.
And she has certainly been, and continues even after her death, to be a beacon of hope for people in recovery.
For all of us.
And there's no such thing as a hopeless alcoholic.
Oh, well, you know the ultimate breath test, breathalyzer?
I think you're going to tell me, but go ahead.
I learned that from a recovering alcoholic lady in Pasadena. She said, you lean over the body, and if he's still breathing, it's positive.
Dr. Joe Pursch. By the way, we will air that full interview in a future podcast. We will continue our tribute to Dr. Joe Pursch, who passed away, sadly, on June 20th, 2021, at his home in Southern California. We'll hear from his oldest son, also named Joe Pursch, and we will do that in just 30 seconds after we hear from the folks who make this podcast possible, the good folks at Sundown M Ranch.
Are you afraid? Afraid of life without drugs and alcohol? There is help and hope at Sundown M Ranch. At Sundown, the focus is on you and your disease. You will learn how to live without depending on drugs and alcohol. Sundown M Ranch is nationally recognized for effective and affordable alcohol and drug treatment programs. Reclaim your life. Replace your fears with hope. Go to www.sundown.org right now to learn more.
Before we hear from Joe Pursch Jr., the oldest of Dr. Pursch's 4 children, we turn our attention to the daughter of former First Lady Betty Ford and her husband, former President of the United States, Gerald R. Ford. Now, Mrs. Ford credited Susan with orchestrating the intervention that saved her life, the intervention that was done by Dr. Joe Pursch.
I still, when I think about going back to it, it goes right to my heart, because she was in such pain, both physically and mentally, and so were we.
Susan looks back fondly on Dr. Pursch and others who teamed up to help guide the former First Lady onto the road to recovery. Just over 40 years of long-term recovery until her passing in 2011.
Thank goodness for Joe Pursch and Joe Cruz and Pat Benedict and all the people that were involved in it, because they're the ones who really made a difference and helped us as a family. But it also led us to Al-Anon and AA and things like that, because we had as much pain as my mother did. And I don't think a lot of families understand or realize that when they hear, the family is just as sick as the patient. And it takes time to understand that.
What do you remember about that time during the intervention and in the first year of your mother's recovery?
The one thing that really sticks out in my mind, and it's one of those sayings or whatever you want to call it still today, is I love the word hope, because hope is how your pain ends. And I really feel like he brought the pain ending in our family. I mean, I can only speak for me and my experience and that sort of thing, but he gave me such confidence about what was going to happen, and it was going to be okay. And if she didn't decide to go to treatment, that we had a plan and all of those things. There was just a lot of comfort and a lot of hope that he gave us.
Dr. Joe Pursch had 4 children: Joe Pursch Jr., Brian A. Pursch, John M. Pursch, and Andrea Pursch Savi. His oldest son, Joe, sums up his dad's life with 8 great words.
Dad was a man of words, a man of healing words, of deep and confrontational words at times. And if you saw him on the platform, you knew that he was a master of words. And so I'd like to borrow some words as I've thought about his life and as we've spoken about him as family, to close and bring you our memories and our tribute. Words like courage, the courage that he had to face a suddenly altered future, alone, 14 years old, being put on a truck to an internment camp, separated from his parents. The courage to face a suddenly altered future alone on that first night in an internment camp, and then the first morning in America to face that future alone. What a future he made of it. Words like determination. Determination not only to survive life as a refugee, life in the terrors of war, but when he got to America, the determination to dream, to imagine an extraordinary future, and to live it. Words like vision. The vision he had, the farther he went in life and the more opportunities that he saw, to leverage his talent and the genius that he had, to leverage all of that with the freedom that America gave him, and to do something remarkable with his life. Words like partnership, like the partnership that he entered into for 29 years with our mom, Irene, whom many of you knew. A partnership in which together they nurtured many dreams, overcame many obstacles, raised a family, greeted the opportunities that would alter the future for him and for her and for us and for thousands of people we never had a chance to meet. Words like compassion. He had the compassion not to look past a problem that generations of physicians before him had looked past. He had the compassion to look at it a second time, and he saw it with a healer's eyes. He thought to himself, these people are suffering, and they can get better, and they will get better. A word like understanding, a practiced understanding through all that he experienced in his early life and all that he gained from your lives. There became an understanding of the human condition. He understood it in deep ways and in so many places of interaction with people. But he particularly understood the addict's experience and the family's suffering for those in addiction. He even understood the tender and even humorous realities of this battle called life. And in the most serious battle ever, the battle for recovery, he didn't forget to keep it human. Words like humor. If you saw him speak on the platform, you know it well. He had the ability to create an incandescent light with words that could often ignite enough hope in someone that They could go into the darkness that early years of recovery were like, and they could do it with a bit of grace and humor that made them cheerfully walk in the dark. And finally, a word like strength. The strength that emboldened him to clearly confront people, both of remarkable achievement or of everyday circumstance, so that they would not cheat themselves out of recovery one day longer. As a family, we saw and knew these things. As a family, we have inherited and will pass on these things, along with a deep understanding of the power of hard work, a belief in the greatness of America, an understanding of the lifelong habit of curiosity, an appreciation for the lasting impact of generosity, and a knowledge of the rare art of showing compassion.
A life well lived, a man well loved. A true leader and legend in the field of addiction treatment and recovery. We remember Dr. Joseph Pursch. I will close with this tribute to Dr. Pursch, who was a friend of mine, with a poem that I wrote upon learning of his passing. Freedom, a tribute to Dr. Pursch. From the pain of aging, from the bondage of self, his work here is now over. Finishing first at the top of his class, with elegance, with dignity. The 92-year circle is finally complete. His legacy is one of courage, wisdom, compassion, determination, perseverance, and love. Mostly love. With freedom in his shoe and passion in his heart, he traversed the unspeakable heartaches with an array of new beginnings, from Belgrade to Bethesda, from the warehouse to the White House, from Newport Beach to Beverly Hills. He once washed windows and then washed lives, making them sparkle and shine through the restoration of life, offering the one true gift of freedom. For it was freedom once concealed in the sole of his shoe, which became his passport home, traveling at the speed of honor to the other side of life. His hands were covered in hope, touching thousands along the way, from presidents to paupers, from pilots to priests, from life to death to recovery. Standing tall on the flight deck of freedom, he charted their course for unimaginable heights, leaving behind a flight plan for others to follow. Witty and white-haired and as sly as a fox, he illuminated the lives of those he touched with his intellect, with his compassion, with his humor, and with his kindness. Now his burden has been laid to rest, but his legacy lives large, overflowing with hope and promise. For in the end, on that day of the summer solstice, there was for Dr. Pursch another new beginning, freedom. Well, that wraps up edition 1513 of the national podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we would love to hear from you. First of all, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. Secondly, send me an email if you would. I'd love to hear from you. recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. And third, feel free to write a review of our ongoing podcast. And lastly, kindly tell one or two of your friends about our podcast. That also really helps us to carry the message. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast. And if you know someone who is experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here's a 24-hour national helpline that offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are also available. It's 1-800-622-HELP. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, which makes the podcast possible, Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, including adolescents and their families, for well over 50 years. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.